Welcome to the Dallas and Alex podcast Proof of Concept, starring Dallas and Alex. I'm Alex. This is also Dallas, and I just realized that he's Dallas. More time should have elapsed for this to. Oh, here we go. Yeah, you want the drum bass? Yeah. So this is the first episode. This might be actually episode 0 of the Proof of Concept podcast with no name yet. And this is literally just a proof of concept. So how's it going, Dallas?
I'm pretty excited.
Oh, actually, no, I should start with who are you, Dallas?
I just realized that we picked the 2 worst names to have a podcast together.
Oh my god.
Like, it could not be worse unless we were both named Alex. Thanks, Mom. God.
You can call me Xander.
Do this to me.
I used to be called that in high school. They used to call, or it was about. I tried to work. Oh, this is really gonna screw me over because I'm looking at my own sound files. I'll minimize that. For about 3 months, I tried to get that to work, and it was like, call me Xander, and then finally the teacher's like, Xander, and I'm not even listening. He's like, Alex, did you listen? But still call me Xander though.
All right, so a little intro about ourselves. As said, my name is Dallas, and I am a space engineer, which is always a great way to start any conversation, or end one, really. We're both Canadians, unless Alex doesn't want to reveal that, and he can remove that later.
I'm actually Laotian.
Yeah, we just wanted to start a podcast because we love talking about random stuff.
I feel like we share a lot of similar interests. My name's Alex. I'm a teacher and part-time mystic, and also part-time caterer downtown. And we both grew up in sort of, I guess, different scenarios. I grew up in the city of Toronto, and Dallas grew up in an unknown wilderness outpost in northern Ontario. And we both met in university, and I think we have very similar tastes in media and things like that. Although our intelligences lie in very disparate realms, so I think it's an interesting sort of fire and water scenario. Keys fire, by the way.
I mean, you and I always kind of complement each other by being, our Venn diagram of interest is always just overlapping. For those listeners out there who don't really know us at all, and you will if you keep listening.
Oh, you will.
Alex is an energetic, outgoing, like you said, he's kind of a mystic. He knows a lot of information about a lot of different things, and I can almost guarantee that anytime you talk with him, you are going to get a lot of positive energy from it and probably learn a lot.
Oh, so...
Whereas...
No, go ahead.
Alex, you can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So Dallas is radically intelligent, meticulous, thoughtful, and provocative. And his mind is like a steel trap. And he's incredibly... fluent and articulate with his words, and he's a very careful speaker. And that is mirrored or accompanied by this huge wealth of intelligence of the sciences, which in a tragic rarity never comes out usually, because all of our circles of friends are usually just talking about like video game shit and like cartoon shit. And then I know if someone talks about like laser grid mapping oscilloscope space technology, Dallas would be like, "Oh yes, well that's the coordinates of the confabulations of the space reprobates," and that would actually reveal his monumental wealth of intelligence. But despite that, overall, he's a great person to be around and a great conversationalist.
Oh well, thank you. A great visual metaphor that Alex and I came up with a couple of months ago is that the way our brains work, Alex represented my brain as a kind of, like giant vault with like steel, like rigid steel components constantly moving and shifting, but in a logical, ordered kind of way. Whereas I likened Alex's mind to like an infinite room of like miasmic thought gases that like weave around in unpredictable ways and like coalesce to form like beautiful things and splinter and break apart and fractal in like a million different ways at once.
It was so funny when that you would mention that, because I remember that vividly. When Carolyn and I were vacationing in Niagara Falls, she said something like, "Oh, Alex, your mind is just like oracles and stones and mist," and I'm like, "You, this completely different person, like analyzed me like that," and I was like, "Oh, that's the funniest shit."
It's always nice when your like self-image is kind of affirmed, especially by a neutral like third party.
Absolutely.
Like somebody who doesn't even know, you know. But yeah, so for anybody out there, we mostly just started this because it was a good excuse to get together on Skype and talk. You might notice a bit of a weird delay or conversation lag, and that's mostly my end. I'm kind of Skyping from the middle of nowhere, Ontario. But also because Alex and I, even if we don't know about a topic, we're always interested to learn. So we usually have something to say on the matter, or at least some way to reflect it back within our own lives. So I thought it'd be a great idea to just kind of explore some ideas that maybe you don't get to explore in everyday life. This
will be not probably. This is the overarching structure of the of our talks will be on basic points, but it's not going to be like specific or like a how do you say a rigid hierarchy of points, but it's kind of more of a loose, laid back thing. That whole sentence didn't actually. I didn't really say anything in these last 10 seconds. That was very much just kind of like, we're going to the meetings. We're gonna have a meeting to construct for the meeting, and then we're gonna decide some points for the meeting. Each talk will have a point. That's my point. Or topic.
Very well said. So I guess we can go over, for any skilled podcasters out there who are now wincing at this horrible thing they stumbled across on the internet.
Please help us.
We do apologize. For a little bit of background, I've had a blog that I've had for a couple of years, so
it's a good blog.
At least in text form, I'm very familiar with voicing my thoughts and presenting to a wider audience. But this is the first time for me where I'm branching out into the audio spectrum of things, so it's kind of interesting. It's a little different.
I have an extremely unpopular Let's Play channel that has about over a year of videos, probably over about 150 videos, with probably about like 75 views in total. So I'm really good at.
Are you gonna plug it right now?
No, because I have too much moral fiber and I don't want anyone to watch them. So I'm really good at following trends and doing things that has already been done to death, and also yelling at video games. I'm extremely good at yelling at video games.
Yeah, so I think
just keep that dead air going,
and the rest you can kind of figure out on the way. Just to branch into a random topic for a moment, I would like to talk a little bit about singing.
Cool.
And why it's suddenly become interesting and important to me and you.
Oh, absolutely. That's always my mom actually does. What do you call it? She works at a choir.
Like in a choir.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to do that now.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting because all my life I listened to mostly classic rock. So the spectrum of singing, male singing voice was always a lot higher in tone, Mm-hmm. Usually when you're listening to classic rock, all the singers are, singing very high. And, yeah. And I mean, like, I would sing along, when the music was much, much louder than I was. But I did find it funny that for a guy with this voice, not really that low, but low enough, I was always singing up there with, like, Geddy Lee and Freddie Mercury and stuff. but I actually I didn't find that I liked to sing. Like I didn't like my own voice for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll come back to why that's changed in a moment. But Alex, why don't you explain your connection with singing? Because you've done quite a lot of impromptu performances.
Oh yes, specifically. So I've always my infatuation with music has always been deep and passionate. Even though I don't actually have any professional training, I love singing. I love using my voice. I love music. I can play the violin and the ney flute and all these kind of instruments. Ego stroke. Oh, they can't see my masturbatory gestures. Oh no. Oh well. You get the vibe now. Um, Despite I'll mention a technique I learned in a few minutes, but there is this actually miraculous little
About singing, right?
about oh, it's called a reverse cowgirl. So there's this part. He's laughing right now, but no noise is coming out. He's a few years ago in the Eglinton station of the Toronto subway, I was I was commuting back up from work and the train shut down, which is a common thing. But unfortunately for this situation, the entire line got shut down, and train after train of people began to pour into Eglinton Station. I realized quickly that this started to become a crisis scenario. As more people poured into the station, I could feel the emotional tension rising as the only people that were able to corral this mass of humanity were 4 or 5 geriatric TTC operators, no police, and they were trying their best, but the buses just weren't coming fast enough, and people started shoving, people started yelling. There's this woman with a baby, and she was starting to get like jostled, and I was like, this is unfortunate. Like, what can I do? I thought of jumping up on a bench and sort of yelling at everyone to calm down, but I knew that wouldn't work because that would just be sort of like pissing into an ocean of piss. Like I would just be like yelling at people yelling. So I turned over to this group of teenage girls and I asked them if they knew who Queen was. And she's like, "Oh yeah, that singer dude, yeah." And I was like, "Okay." So I got up on a bench and I proceeded to sing the entirety of Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen by myself, unaccompanied. And it
Including all
worked.
the instruments.
Yes, without all of the. Actually, oh yeah, there's electric guitar and shit in there. I make no minimal. This is no hyperbole in the sense that I calmed this riot. It was going to be a riot, and it stopped because of that. Because everyone turned over like, "Oh, what a banality!" Oh, people put it out their cell phone cameras, and to prove it, it's on a YouTube video. I swear, it's man sings Queen at subway station, and that was probably the highlight of like. I think a friend of mine, Ryan Haas, said that was something that heroes do, and that made me feel really, really good.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome, like in the true sense of the word, because Alex, you're always willing to kind of um, take on a grandiose stance if you have to. So what I meant, listeners, that about him being outgoing is that you got to understand Alex is 6'4" for all you European
I'm
listeners. It's
pretty
190
huge.
centimeters tall, and he's you know he's this giant of a person, and thankfully he doesn't shy away from that. He can take a giant perspective and lead a crowd or calm down a crowd, and I've always found that
Aw,
to be really awesome. But
thanks, dude.
aside from the compliment sharing back and forth,
Mutual
um,
dick stroking.
yeah.
No, I like yours
So
better.
like I like I said, singing has always been an interesting thing. My family is very musical. They all play instruments. My sister taught herself how to play 6 different things.
Whoa!
But I
I
always
didn't
kind of
know
saw
that.
myself as a bit. Yeah, she could play like I don't know, piano, saxophone, clarinet, trumpet.
Holy
I don't know.
crap! She's
My
a
uncles
multi
have been yeah, my
instrumentalist.
uncles yeah, and my uncles have been playing guitar and singing since they could hold a guitar. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I've always felt a little bit outside of that, and with singing, again, the only real practice I had was, trying to hold the high note in some Queen song. But this last year actually changed that quite a lot, and I found it kind of interesting. When I went overseas, and I was hanging out with new people, and I was a project manager for a bunch of people, and you work long hours, late nights, and sometimes you honestly just want to yell at people. Your patience has disappeared, and you just want to, why are you wasting my time?
I know that feeling.
But again, yelling at a group of people yelling is not effective. So what do? What I started doing was I started doing silly voices, because if you yell at someone while sounding like Arnold Schwarzenegger, they don't usually get upset with you. And this was also partially inspired by my friends back home who always used to do funny voices and stuff. And what I found as a side effect, as a consequence, is I started growing comfortable with the sound of my voice in and out of character. And when music started playing and people were singing, I actually felt very comfortable singing, because I had already shared my voice so much that it wasn't, it was easier to sing than it was to make some silly voice, because it was my own voice that was participating. So I found it kind of interesting in a roundabout way that I've come to value it personally over time.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I've always loved music. I've always had a good connection with it, and I don't know, maybe it's Disney or something, or old books, but music and song always have such a powerful connection with people. Like,
oh yes,
they want to make a person creepier, they make her sing. They want to make a woman more beautiful, they make her sing. It's interesting. Absolutely. the power that it can have, and I've always personally found it as a kind of, I don't know, I don't want to be too esoteric. For me it's kind of spiritual, but it's more like music can at once enunciate what's inside of you at the moment. You can bring a lot of power behind it. Words can do the same thing, but I find music starts there. You start with an emotion, and then you can maybe add some lyrics to it or whatever.
Have you ever seen the movie The King's Speech?
I've heard of it, obviously, and but I haven't gotten around to watching it.
So this movie the movie is about this famous king who whose name escapes me, and he has a speech defect, and he is under the tutelage of this famous speech pathologist. And one of the techniques, which is actually a real technique, is if you can't say something because of some sort of trauma, or you have this, because speech pathology, speech impediments are almost entirely in the realm of the mental. It's all very rare that you have one that's physically based. So it's some sort of mental block. If you can't say it, you sing it, and this has a neural concomitant, because things that are remembered verbally are encoded in a different way, not necessarily a different part of the brain, but in a different structural method, structural modality in the brain, as when it is sung. So this means that not only is that fucking cool, but you can also, as a technique, memorize things by singing them instead of just saying them. So something completely banal like multiplication tables or the periodic table of elements, you can sing it through like da 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 argon. I fucked up the very first one. The very first one. Whatever, hydrogen, gold, uranium, and you can go through. That was like, I think that was a vertical slice of the entire table of elements.
Yeah, you started at 1 and jumped to like 118.
And I found that super, super cool. And I think actually I've heard some stories of people who have had difficulties remembering things. Right, yeah. People who have amnesia, more powerful amnesia, Alzheimer's. Their brains get intensely stimulated when they listen to music, as well as they can remember songs but not facts, because it's encoded in a different way in the brain. So it definitely has a powerful effect, music and song.
It's It's interesting too because on the flip side, like people have used singing to help them speak, but there have been famous singers who stuttered quite a lot in interviews and stuff like that, and they could sing, and there was no, presence of any kind of speech impediment while they were singing, and then they would stop and they would have difficulty, in a non-lyrical conversation. So I found that quite interesting too.
There's a famous technique that has been used in years past as well as very recently in the education, like in education generally, where kids with stutters will listen to music and then they'll read this thing, and the loud music will cause them to not stutter, and then they'll record their voice non-stuttering, and then they play the non-stuttering voice back at them as this sort of this mental anchor that proves to their brains that they can actually speak without stuttering. And there's this huge paradigm shift. You play it to their parents, and it's on the level of like soldiers coming home video compilations, like emote feeling porn, like emotional porn, where people are like, oh, the soldier's the dog misses him, and he's, oh my god. So it's like, oh, the kid stutters, he doesn't stutter anymore.
Well, if you think about it, it goes back to what I was saying about I used to sing with the music, and when you cut the music away, it used to be very, very difficult to be like, oh no, what am I doing? But in that way, it's kind of the same, where these kids are reading with the music, and then you cut the music away, but you prove to them that they can do it.
Very interesting. There's a fascinating...
It's like...
Oh, go ahead. Oh, as a caveat here, we do have a slight delay. I think we mentioned this before, so we might run into those kind of things. But there's a really fascinating book by... he wrote The Brain That Changes Itself. Not Daniel Goleman. He wrote Emotional Intelligence. It'll come to me. The book is called The Brain's Way of Healing, and as a quick aside, there's this one chapter where he talks about this method whereby kids with sensory sensitivity problems will listen to static that is modulated from the voice of a loved one that is sort of just pulled into it's like distorted into static, and it causes the brain to reorganize itself in such a way to in perceiving the static, the brain's attempt to make sense out of this white noise produces a calming effect, which has an observable empirical neural corollary, which is super cool, and it's also a super concrete proof of people buying these like whale noise soundtracks and white noise soundtracks. And I'm actually a huge fan of like new age music, by the way. As an aside, since we're talking about music, it's just the corniest Raelian synth shit galaxy, like 1970s galaxy Carl Sagan dawn of the new sun of Aquarius. I love those albums. Oh my god. Robert Craig Hodgson, holy crap. I could listen to that for hours.
Going back, another funny thing is songs that the singers purposefully applied a speech impediment to and became more popular because of it.
Oh?
My Generation by The Who.
Oh, yeah! He was supposed to be on drugs. Like, that's why he has that stutter? Or rather,
whatever the reason, they could have recorded it without that, and the song would be immensely different, and I think less popular. People sing it with the emphasis, if you want
on the different syllable.
Generation. There's a bunch of songs like that. I can't think of too many right now, but I know a lot of like classic rock and stuff. They will often. There's a couple by the Guess Who that do that as well. They throw in a kind of a stutter, and not even just like once. It's like a main theme of the song.
For real,
so it's kind of interesting that something that is normally very negative in public society is embraced entirely in the music industry.
Oh yeah, it is very much like people. It's very difficult to live with a stutter, and what actually really fascinates me is Tourette syndrome in that same vein. That people are like Tourette syndrome. I don't know too much about it, but the fact that it's like the fact that there's this sort of cognizance about it, like if you've ever heard that sometimes people with Tourette syndrome will be like insulting the people around them in specific ways, like racial epithets and like calling people like fat asses and stuff like that. Like that's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to live with because like how easily interpretable.
On a side note, because this is our zeroth podcast, we'll have to establish some kind of method for trailing down the conversation to the to the final moment.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you and I could probably talk forever about anything and even staying on topic, but we'll have to figure out a way to kind of say, okay, let's denouement this conversation and then wrap it up with some kind of like, what does singing mean to you? Think about it. Enjoy your day. Bye.
That interesting that you would bring that up, because that sounds like a perfect segue to me, since we're at about 25 minutes, I think. And so what does singing? Well, here's a question that I have for you, Dallas. Is have you put any thought towards either singing more in a structured way or in a systematic way, or putting music together or making some music?
I'll start with the second. Putting music together or making music is, I don't know. It's something that I find kind of interesting, but there's a lot of work involved, and as much as music is a big part of my life, I'm still very passive about it. Meaning I'm absorbing and I'm listening and maybe I'm sharing, but I'm not really doing too much creating. I used to write poetry before and
get out of here
stuff like that. But
you got to email me some of that shit.
I find with some of the creative endeavors, I really enjoy them, but I don't participate too much in them. We can come back to that in a later conversation. But making music is something that I'm not inspired to do too much. The same with drawing, the same with writing fiction. I love receiving that media, but not creating it myself. In terms of more of a collaborative effort or something like that, definitely. But again, it would have to be in a relaxed sort of environment. So, you and I have sung karaoke before.
Oh yeah.
And that was very fun.
That was radical.
I don't mind that kind of casual group dynamic. It's fun. I've done pub night singing where, and this last weekend I was at a family reunion where I played my banjo and sang along with my uncles while playing guitar.
Oh, amazing.
And I like that kind of stuff, but it's a very low pressure kind of, not that the pressure bothers me, but I'm just not inspired to create anything of my own. I just kind of like collaborative efforts with other people. What about you?
Well, I was, before I mentioned, I just wanted to build on that for a second, because earlier, if I had, a few months ago, I would have thought that was kind of weird to be like, an individual's not really interested in creating music or like making music like that if they're a fan of listening to music. I had a friend of mine mentioned to me while we were camping that she's an artist. She's a cartoonist. Actually, she works for she's a professional cartoonist, and she said that she loves listening to music, but she just doesn't care for or is interested in creating music. And I thought that was so interesting. More on reflecting on my own character, because I was like, the more I listen to music, the more I want to create music. I even want to make like a rap album or something like that. But so to answer your question, I am currently learning a few instruments. I actually have a very interesting musical talent that I don't think our listeners know about unless you know us personally. Is I'm self-taught Mongolian throat singing. If anyone's ever heard overtone singing, check that out on YouTube, and that's a trip. I did that in front of a couple of musicians, and they were super, the kind of people who are interested in that kind of thing, like world music, and they just ate it up, and I love the fact that they ate it up. That's super cool. So I think it's time to wrap it up. I hope you had tons of fun here, and let's see if we can Wait for it. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening, and hopefully any of this made sense. We're going to keep working on improving the format, so stay tuned next time, and if you have any suggestions, let us know.
All right, you got it. Till next time, everybody, and we'll have a name for the podcast later.